Never smoked. I didn't have any factors that really made a red flag go up that it could be cancer. I think I was just kind of in denial. There's just not, this is not happening. It was,
Shock.
yeah, shock, a lot of shock. Well, this is my husband, Nick. We met our freshman year of college and started dating end of freshman year. So we celebrate our 15-year wedding anniversary in May. We've been together a little over 20 years. We have two 8-year-olds, boys. They're twins. They're amazing. I was a labor and delivery nurse for 15 years. I used to teach Pilates as well. I love to work out, fitness, health, all that has always been super high on my list of priorities. So this was kind of a shocker, to be honest. But in a nutshell. I remember 2020, start of the pandemic. Um, I started having pain in my right rib. And I remember mentioning it to you several times, but like I said, I work out a lot. So I just thought I pulled a muscle or bruised a rib or something along those lines. And then in July of 2020, we went hiking in Colorado. And I couldn't go 20 yards without my heart rate shooting up and just being so short of breath. And I remember telling you, this isn't normal. And then fast forward another month, I started getting a cough that just lingered, went to the doctor, drew blood, tested all that, started me on antibiotics, did a steroid, nothing helped. And then September, I went back in and I told my primary care doctor, who's also a family friend, I said, it's just not getting better. These steroids aren't working, the antibiotics aren't working. So we did a couple of tests in the office to check pulmonary function. And I failed that miserably. So from there it was, let's go see a pulmonologist. Let's go ahead and get a CT scan, chest x-ray.
They said that she had the lung capacity of about an 80-year-old. So that raised some pretty significant concerns. That was, I think, the first real alarm bell for the primary care doctor. And that's what sort of initiated the specialist.
I kind of tried to self-diagnose myself with adult onset asthma. And after that pulmonary function test, it was obvious that that was not the case. From there, we were sent to a pulmonologist where they thought it could be sarcoidosis or
sarcoidosis, yeah, some type of interstitial lung
yeah.
disease. Nobody ever speculated that lung cancer could have even been an option. Just
never smoked. I didn't have any factors that really made a red flag go up that it could be cancer. I got scheduled for a bronchoscopy early October 2020. And when I came out of the procedure, Nick could hear me in the waiting room. I was telling the nurses, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. When I came out, I was on the unit. And from there, it just became, we saw every doctor known to man. Epidemiologist, because we had just been to Colorado. They thought maybe I had a fungus in my lung. I mean, we saw everybody. And then
I think for a couple hours they thought you had tuberculosis. 4 or 5 days of just tests and treatments and poking and prodding. And the whole time she had a chest tube in and trying to, heal the collapsed lung. Eventually that happened. So yeah, the concerning thing was the pulmonologist who did the bronchoscopy. I think, looking back at it, he knew what was really happening. And he wasn't, he couldn't diagnose her, but he saw all these other tests being run, and he saw just the misery that she was in that hospital stay. And we could tell he was frustrated. And at one point, when they moved her to the isolation room, when they thought she had tuberculosis, he came in and was furious that, somebody would be putting her through that, and started ripping out all the
Yeah, he was not happy.
tubes and, starting to get us out of there. So it was the first time, I think, that was for me the first time I realized this was more serious.
Early on, an oncologist did come into the room, so I think we were already a little bit aware, and our primary care doctor had a conversation with us and said, there's some things that look a little off. They could be nothing, but sometimes they can be. It does look like it could be a little bit cancerous. I can't remember what he called them,
Bony masses.
bony masses. Come to find out, the cancer was stage 4. So it had already spread to my pelvis, my right femur, and my cervical spine. So that's what he saw. And, we found that out later. But we kind of had a little bit of an inkling it could be a possibility. Everybody else was saying it could be this, it could be this. So we were holding tight to all the possibilities that they were giving us and putting that one like in the back, like, surely not. That can't be happening. On the 10th, they tried to tell us, and not so many words, but to discharge us, they had to give us a diagnosis. And so, because the tissue biopsy takes so long to get back, it's like 10 to 14 days. Our appointment with the oncologist here in town wasn't until I think Thursday the following week. So we had almost a week at home to sit there and just marinate on everything, not knowing where my primary tumor was, what exact type of cancer I had. We just knew I had cancer. So we came home and we had to tell our family, and they had so many questions and we had no answers, which was hard. I think I was just kind of in denial, like, this is not happening. Like, it was, yeah, shock.
When we then went to MD Anderson for second opinion, which was sort of in that week waiting period, we were to get into MD Anderson. So we drove down to Houston, which is about a 4-hour drive. And they ran all the tests, all the scans, all the things that she had just gone through the week before in the hospital. They sort of redid that in their environment. And they basically said, this is clear, no question, obviously a mass in your right middle lobe, and it's lung cancer. It's advanced stage, and we need to start treatment
today. Remember, this is COVID, so I'm going in there by myself, FaceTiming him. And I think it's hard as anybody getting any news, but trying to not departmentalize, but trying to separate like my nurse brain from my patient brain and really absorb it all was really, really difficult for me. And I'm so glad I had FaceTime and second set of ears, because I honestly think I heard half what they were telling me, because I was trying to separate the two. It was a lot. It was a lot to hear, handle, navigate on my own.
I remember you asking, but we caught this pretty early, right? Basically, he just very bluntly said no. That was the sort of eye opener.
Yeah, I think because my symptoms came so fast, like from basically July. I don't really count March when my ribs started hurting. In reality, that probably is when it happened. But I'm just thinking July, August, September, 3 months. Like, I'm here. And he was like, no, no, no. When we went to Houston, my oncologist said, we're still waiting on those biopsy results. What I'm hoping for is that you have a genetic mutation. We had never heard of anything like that. And so we were like, what do you mean genetic mutation? And he said some non-small cell lung cancers, there's some sort of genetic mutation that we can target. So we can use targeted therapy to attack that mutation and avoid chemo for the most part. And I was like, really? Tell me more. So we went there, did all the scans, came home for 2 days, drove back. And at that point, the biopsy results were back, and we found out that I have an EGFR mutation. So thankfully, with that, there is a medication that can target it that I was a candidate for, along with a clinical trial that I also was a candidate for. They gave us the option to choose between two. I got started on Tagrisso, which targets the EGFR mutation, along with Xyramza, which is an IV medication that I received every 3 weeks. It's actually for stomach cancer, but they were seeing what the two combined could do together.
The clinical trial was testing whether or not the combination of those two medications would prolong the effectiveness, increase the effectiveness. One of the issues that they have with the TKI, the targeted medications, is that they develop resistance, body develops resistance over time. They were hoping that this Cyramza would prolong that or put that off, the resistance, uh, for a certain amount of time. I don't think they got clear results, not from Tiffany's trial, because she kind of her case lasted, the average, basically the average amount of time before he started developing there. But I did want to say one thing about that testing, that genetic biomarker testing, is that if she had started chemo when the local oncologist wanted to, she would have been, first of all, they probably wouldn't have gotten answers on the genetic mutation. And it would have precluded her from most of the clinical trials that she was a candidate for. So getting the genetic biomarker testing done first, even though it caused some additional waiting, which was tough, it was so important. And in hindsight, even now, as she's being considered for other clinical trials, it's very important, because the more lines of treatment that you've been exposed to, the more you start to get excluded from more.
Yeah. Well, with genetic testing, just so people know, you're going to get pushback, especially from insurance companies. But it is such a huge asset to have and could potentially change the steps going forward. So I feel very blessed that my oncologist was a huge advocate for that.
And the oncologist at MD Anderson, that's just part of their standard protocol. And so there's a couple different ways that you can do it. There's actually a liquid biopsy, which is just a blood test now that looks for circulating tumor DNA in the blood. And it's a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. So it's harder for them to get a clear picture of any kind of genetic mutations that are driving cancer from the liquid biopsy, but it's still an option that's less invasive and easier to get done. They literally just drew like 10 vials of blood.
I just had one done not too long ago again. So yeah, I think education is so huge. And when you get a diagnosis like this, most people go to Google. I wish there was some page that we could put up that just said, do these 5 things right off the bat, like make sure you ask for genetic testing. Here's what to do next. Make sure you get a second opinion. Like, I wish there was a check box list for people, like, when I get my cancer diagnosis, what do I do now? Because it felt so, we were all over the place and everybody was Googling things. We were hearing things from left, right, center. And it was really overwhelming. But I wish there was like a list of make sure you do this, 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 and this. We didn't know what to ask for. So I started a clinical trial taking the Tagrisso, which is what Nick was saying, the primary way to treat EGFR mutation, with the Xyramza. So the Xyramza was an IV every 3 weeks. So every 3 weeks, we loaded up, headed to Houston, and I would get my infusion and check up with the oncologist, get my labs drawn. It was kind of every, I think, third visit, I would have a CT scan, chest X-ray, MRI, brain MRI, because um, lung cancer tends to go to your bones and your brain. And it had already gone to my bones. We're just trying to make sure it doesn't go to my brain. Um, it the Xyramza has its own set of side effects too. So I had a lot of bloody noses. The Tagrisso has side effects. Both of them cause headache. The Tagrisso makes your body break out in a rash, especially as it's getting built up in your system. So that affected me very greatly. I mean, I had just sores and they were everywhere in my mouth, in between my fingers and my toes, my knees, my elbows. Um, but they're able to kind of help you with all those things with creams and meds. And um, so along this journey, the Xyramza also delays healing. And about a year into treatment, my I was just sitting with my mom talking, and my left lung collapsed. I felt just immense pressure, like what I would think a heart attack feels like. Um, Tried to walk it off, tried to take some like muscle relaxers, anything I could to make the pain go away. Nothing was happening. And I waited several hours, what, 4 or 5 hours before I finally was like, okay, Nick, I think I need to go to the hospital. They did a stat chest x-ray and my left lung was just the shrimp, it was gone. So I got a stat chest tube and earned a 10-day stay. With that came taking what was a med break from the Xyramza. So we went back to Houston after I got discharged, um, and they held it for 2 cycles. And with the clinical trial, there's all these things you have to meet. So I was able to take this break, but then I had to get back on it in order to stay on the trial. The caveat with that was if I have another collapsed lung, we're done. So at the same time as that was happening, um, Tagrisso can cause liver toxicity, and my liver enzymes were just shooting up through the roof. So we had to take a break.
Yeah, which was really concerning because this is a year into treatment and everything
Yeah.
was actually working phenomenally well. And they were shocked actually how well everything was controlled. At the time that this second pneumothorax happened, she was really healthy and strong and doing well. So the fear of having to end the clinical trial that was working so well was really like the top of both of our minds.
I felt like me again. I mean, I just every 3 weeks we did our thing. And um that was a huge like, hey, this is really still happening, because we had gotten so accustomed to like everything working and falling into place. And so we took a break from both, huge med break. During that time, the cancer did grow a little bit. So we knew that these treatments were effective. They didn't grow a lot, very, very minuscule, but still our oncologist was like, you got to be on this. This is not an option for you. So we restarted February of 2022, I think was the end of the med break. Started back on track. Everything was great. We once again coasted until November. I'd had some increased chest cramping, and it just was getting worse and worse and worse and more often. And this time it was labs oncologist, uh, Xyramza CT. And I was really uncomfortable with that given the symptoms I was having. And so she was like, why don't you just go to the ED, get checked out? They'll do that test for you. We'll have it, and then we can proceed tomorrow. And I was like, okay, sounds good. They did a stat chest x-ray. Everything looked great. They did a CT scan, and this ER doc, who is not an oncologist, comes booming into our room, and he's like, well, the reason you feel so bad is because your cancer is worse. And we looked at each other like, this guy's like happy and jolly, and you just told me really, really bad news. Like, What is wrong with you? Um, so we ended up getting admitted. Um, that started a whole slew of more tests.
We've been living in fear of her since the day she started taking it, because they'll tell you this will stop working eventually.
Yeah.
It's great when it works, but when it stops, then you got to figure out why. So yeah, that was how we found out that.
And now we're starting a new clinical trial. It does not have a name. I don't even know, like the med doesn't have a name. It's a true early stage medicine. So I'm taking that in conjunction with the Tagrisso still. And we actually go back on Monday and we'll find out if it's working.
So they didn't find any new genetic mutations. So the thought is that the existing genetic mutation has just built up some type of survival mechanism, and they think that they know why that survival mechanism is happening. So I guess it'll be pretty obvious when we go this week if it's working or not working.
Yeah.
If it's working, it's great, and she gets to continue on. But if it's not working, then that's the drawing.
I think that's been the hardest part for me is I'm pretty independent and I like to do things for myself, but allowing people to help you is huge. Like, I mean, that's just one little tiny aspect of it all, but you know, over time, we've had so many conversations, and one of the things that is so important to me is that like we don't leave this earth without making an impression. And this guy like thought about that hardcore. He came up with a really great thing. So we started a nonprofit, which gives us like a lot of meaning behind all of this too.
I also know one of the things Tiffany has done a lot really well, I think better than I would be able to, is finding a way to still smile and have fun and laugh and do stuff with the kids. Yeah, so even when she's hurting or not feeling well, she's still outside of the kids. She's still doing things, and it's harder, and it's definitely, especially with COVID, and there's a lot of fear around like doing things and being out there. But if you stop living, then you stop.
I think you just, at least for me, it's been just trying to maintain normalcy in always in living life. Like we have a very big zest for life and just going out and doing it. Like don't hold back. I guess that's the thing too. You always think, oh, when I retire, I'll go do this. Well, that isn't going to happen for everybody. We don't know what's going to happen to us by the end of the day. So you may as well just live for each and every moment.